National Public Radio, in association with Independent Radio Drama Productions, presents one of the cases of Sherlock Holmes, with Edward Petherbridge as Sherlock Holmes and David Peart as Dr. John H. Watson. This is A Study in Scarlet.
If you are unable to come, I shall give you fuller details and would esteem it a great kindness if you would favour me with your opinion. Yours faithfully, Tobias Gregson. Why, this is terrible.
Gregson is the smartest of the Scotland Yarders. He and Lestrade are the pick of a bad lot. They're both quick and energetic, but conventional, shockingly so. They have their knives into one another, too. They are as jealous as a pair of professional beauties. There will be some fun over this case if they both are on the scent.
Surely there's not a moment to be lost. Shall I go and order you a cab?
I'm not sure about whether I shall go. I'm the most incurably lazy devil that ever stood in shoe leather. That is when the fit is on me.
Why, it is just the sort of chance you've been longing for.
My dear fellow, what does it matter to me? Supposing I unravel the whole matter, you may be quite sure that Gregson, Lestrade and company will pocket all the credit. That comes of being an official personage.
But he begs you to help him.
Yes, he knows that I'm his superior, and he acknowledges it to me, but he would cut his tongue out before he would own it to any third person. However, we may as well go and have a look. I shall work it out on my own hook. I may have a laugh at them, if I have nothing else. Come on. Get your hat.
Oh, you really want me to come along with you?
Yes, if you have nothing better to do. I've never liked the look or the sound of Cremona fiddles. In my opinion, every violinist should be able to play a Stradivarius or an Amati at one point during his playing career. Don't you agree, my dear Watson?
You don't seem to give much thought to the matter in hand.
No doubting it. It's a capital mistake to theorize before you have all the evidence. It biases the judgment.
You'll have your data soon. This is the Brixton Road. And that is the house, if I'm not very much mistaken.
No, it is.
Stop. Driver, stop. Why he wishes to tramp the last 100 yards is beyond me. It's wet and very gloomy. Number 3 Lauriston Gardens. 3 tiers of vacant, melancholy windows. Black and dreary, and a to let card. Reminds me of a cataract I had to treat on a bleary-eyed old general. The place is sloppy from the rain. Here's a police constable and knots of loafers craning their necks in the hope of sighting a body. This is quite grotesque. Good God, what is Holmes doing now? He's lounging up and down the pavement with a manner bordering on affectation. Now he's gazing down at the ground. Now he's smiling. But I can't for the life of me see how he could hope to learn anything from the wet soil. We've had clod-hopping policemen tramping all over it for hours.
Mr. Holmes, it is indeed kind of you to come. I have had everything left untouched.
Except that if a herd of buffaloes had passed along, there could not be a greater mess. No doubt, however, you had drawn your own conclusions, Gregson, before you permitted this.
I've had so much to do inside the house. My colleague, Mr. Lestrade, is here. I've relied upon him to look after this.
With 2 such men as yourself and Lestrade upon the ground, there will not be much for a third party to find out.
I think we have done all that can be done. It's a queer case, though. I knew your taste for such things.
You did not come here in a cab?
No, sir.
Then let us go and look at the room.
You always get a feeling about the presence of death. So here it is. Large square room, no furniture to speak of, vulgar wallpaper, blotched with mildew, great strips of it hanging down. White imitation marble mantelpiece with the stump of a red wax candle. So, here we are. The deceased, grim, motionless, stretched upon the boards, and vacant, sightless eyes. Age, about 44. Build, middle-sized. Hair colour, black, curling. Short, stubbly beard. Clothes, heavy black frock coat, waistcoat with light grey trousers, immaculate collar and cuffs. Position of body, hands clenched and arms thrown out, lower limbs interlocked. His death had clearly been a grievous one. Face. Good God. An expression of horror. Hatred, it would seem to me, that I've never seen upon human features. He looks almost ape-like with his terrible malignant contortion. Blunt nose, ugly jaw.
This case will make a stir, sir. It beats anything I've seen, and I'm no chicken.
There is no clue.
None at all.
You're sure there is no wound?
Positive.
Positive.
Then, with these numerous gouts and splashes of blood lying around, it would suggest that the blood must belong to a second individual, presumably the murderer, if murder has been committed. It reminds me of the circumstances attendant on the death of Van Jansen in Utrecht in the year 34. Do you remember the case, Gregson?
No, sir.
Read it up, you really should. There's nothing new under the sun. It's all been done before.
This is really a sight to behold. His fingers are flying here, there, and everywhere. Feeling, pressing, unbuttoning. Oh, he's sniffing the dead man's lips. Now glancing at the soles of his patent leather boots.
He has not been moved at all?
No more than was necessary for the purposes of our examination.
You can take him to the mortuary now. There is nothing more to be learned.
Constables, it's a stretcher bearer.
There's been a woman here. It's a woman's wedding ring. Here, have a look.
Oh, dear, this does complicate matters. Heaven knows they were complicated enough before.
You're quite sure it doesn't simplify them? There's nothing to be learned by staring at it. What did you find in his pocket?
We have it all here. A gold watch, number 97163 by Barrow of London. Gold Albert chain, very heavy and solid. Gold ring with Masonic device. Gold pin, bulldog's head with rubies as eyes. Russian leather card case with cards of Enoch J. Drebber of Cleveland, corresponding with the EJD upon the linen. No purse, but loose money to the extent of £7.13. Pocket edition of Boccaccio's Decameron, with the name of Joseph Stangerson upon the flyleaf. 2 letters, one addressed to E.J. Drebber and one to Joseph Stangerson.
At what address?
American Exchange, Strand, to be left till called for. They were both from the Guillaume Steamship Company and referred to the sailing of their boats from Liverpool. It's clear that this unfortunate man was about to return to New York.
Have you made any inquiries as to this man, Stangerson?
I did it at once, sir. I've had advertisements sent to all the newspapers, and one of my men has gone to the American Exchange, but he's not returned yet.
Have you made any contact with Cleveland?
We telegraphed this morning.
How did you word your inquiries?
He simply detailed the circumstances and said we should be glad of any information which could help us.
You did not ask for particulars on any point which appeared to you to be crucial?
I asked about Stangerson.
Nothing else? Is there no circumstance on which this whole case appears to hinge? Will you not telegraph again?
I've said all I have to say.
Mr. Gregson, I have just made a discovery of the highest importance, and one which would have been overlooked had I not made a careful examination of the walls. Come here. Now, come here. Now, stand there. Look at that.
On the yellow plaster, where the paper has peeled off, scrawled in blood, red letters, R-A-C-H-E. Rach.
What do you think of that? This was overlooked because it was in the darkest corner of the room, and no one thought of looking there. The murderer has written it with his or her own blood. You see that smear where it's trickled down the wall? That disposes of the idea of suicide anyhow. Now, why was that corner chosen to write it on? I will tell you. See that candle on the mantelpiece? It was lit at the time, and if it was lit, this corner would be the brightest instead of the darkest portion of the wall.
And what does it mean, now that you have found it?
Mean? Why, it means that the writer was going to put the female name Rachel, but was disturbed before he or she had time to finish. You mark my words. When this case comes to be cleared up, you will find that a woman named Rachel has something to do with it.
Aha.
It's all very well for you to laugh, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. You may be very smart and clever, but the old hound is the best when all's said and done.
I really beg your pardon. You certainly have the credit of being the first to find this out, and, as you say, it bears every mark of having been written by the other participant in last night's mystery. I have not had time to examine this room, yet with your permission I shall do so now.
Here he goes again. Tape measure. Large, round magnifying glass. He's flat on his face now. You know, he reminds me of a pure-blooded, well-trained foxhound as it dashes backwards and forwards, whining in its eagerness until it comes across the lost scent. He seems to be measuring invisible marks. Why is he applying the tape to the wall? He's gathering a little pile of dust and putting it away in an envelope. Now he's going over the red letters on the wall with his glass.
They say that genius is an infinite capacity for taking pains. It's a very bad definition, but it does apply to detective work.
Have you come to any conclusion?
What do you think of it, sir?
It would be robbing you of the credit of the case if I was to presume to help you. You are doing so well now that it would be a pity for anyone to interfere. If you will let me know how your investigations go, I shall be only too happy to give you any help I can. In the meantime, I should like to speak to the constable who found the body. Can you give me his name and address?
John Rance. He's off duty now. You will find him at 46 Audley Court, Kennington Park Gate.
Come along, Dr. Watson. We shall go and look him up. I'll tell you one thing which may help you in the case, my dear Lestrade and Gregson. There has been a murder done, and the murderer was a man. He was more than 6 feet high, was in the prime of life, had small feet for his height, wore coarse, square-toed boots, and smoked a Trichinopoly cigar. He came here with his victim in a 4-wheeled cab, which was drawn by a horse with 3 old shoes and 1 new one on his off foreleg. In all probability, the murderer had a florid face, and the fingernails of his right hand were remarkably long. These are only a few indications, but they may assist you.
If this man was murdered, how was it done?
Poison. Oh, and one other thing, Lestrade. Rache is the German for revenge. So don't lose your time looking for Miss Rachel. Come, Watson. We must be off. Audley Court, Kennington Park Gate, please.
You were a while sending that telegram.
Indeed, it was a fairly long one, but I think it is important to understand that there is nothing like first-hand evidence. As a matter of fact, my mind is entirely made up on the case. But still, we may as well learn all that is to be learned.
You amaze me, Holmes. Surely you're not as sure as you pretend to be of all those particulars which you gave to Lestrade and Gregson.
There is no room for mistake. The very first thing which I observed on arriving there was that a cab had made 2 ruts with its wheels close to the curb. Now, up to last night, we have had no rain for a week, so that those wheels which left such a deep impression must have been there during the night. And there were the marks of the horse's hooves, too, the outline of the one which was far more clearly cut than that of the other 3, showing that there was a new shoe. Since the cab was there after the rain began, and was not there at any time during the morning, I have Gregson's word for that, it follows that it must have been there during the night, and therefore that it brought those 2 individuals to the house.
Well, that seems simple enough. But how about the other man's height?
Why, the height of a man in 9 cases out of 10 can be told from the length of his stride. It is a simple calculation enough, though there is no use my boring you with the figures. I had this fellow's stride both on the clay outside and on the dust within. Then I had a way of checking my calculation. When a man writes on a wall, his instinct leads him to write about the level of his own eyes. Now, that writing was just over 6 feet from the ground. It was child's play.
And his age?
Well, if a man can stride 4.5 feet without the smallest effort, he can't be yellow and withered with age. That was the breadth of a puddle on the garden walk, which he had evidently walked across. Patent leather boots had gone round, and square toes had hopped over. There is no mystery about it at all. I am simply applying to ordinary life a few of those precepts of observation and deduction which I advocated in that article that so annoyed you. Is there anything else that puzzles you?
The fingernails and the trichinopoly.
The writing on the wall was done with a man's forefinger dipped in blood. My glass allowed me to observe that the plaster was slightly scratched in doing it, which would not have been the case if the man's nail had been trimmed. I gathered up some scattered ash from the floor. It was dark in colour and flaky, such an ash as is only made by trichinopoly cigars. I have made a special study of cigar ashes, in fact. I have written a treatise upon the subject. I flatter myself that I can distinguish at a glance the ash of any known brand, either of cigar or of tobacco. It is just in such details that the skilled detective differs from the Gregson and Lestrade type.
What on earth did you mean by the florid face?
That was a more daring shot, though I have no doubt that it was right. You must not ask me that at the present state of the affair.
My head is in a whirl. The more one thinks of it, the more mysterious it grows. How came those two men, if there were two men, into an empty house? What has become of the cabman who drove them? How could one man compel another man to take poison? Where did the blood come from? What was the object of the murder, since robbery had no part in it? How came the woman's ring to be there? Above all, why should the second man write up the German word Rache before decamping? Now, I confess that I cannot see any possible way of reconciling all these facts.
You sum up the difficulties of the situation succinctly and well. There is much that is still obscure, though I have quite made up my mind on the main facts. As to poor Lestrade's discovery, it was simply a blind intended to put the police upon the wrong track by suggesting socialism and secret societies. It was not done by a German. The A, if you noticed, was printed somewhat after the German fashion. Now, a real German invariably prints in the Latin character, so that we may safely say that this was not written by a German, but by a clumsy imitator who overdid his part. It was simply a ruse to divert inquiry into a wrong channel. I'm not going to tell you much more of the case. Doctor, you know a conjurer gets no credit once he has explained his trick. And if I show you too much of my method of working, you will come to the conclusion that I'm a very ordinary fellow, after all.
I shall never do that. You have made detection as near to an exact science as it will ever be brought in this world.
I'll tell you one other thing. Patent leathers and square toes came in the same cab, and they walked down the pathway together as friendly as possible, arm in arm, in all probability. When they got inside, they walked up and down the room, or rather, patent leathers stood still, while square toes walked up and down. I could read all that in the dust, and I could read that as he walked, he grew more and more excited. That is shown by the increased length of his strides. He was talking all the while and working himself up, no doubt, into a fury. Then the tragedy occurred. I've told you all I know myself now. The rest is mere surmise and conjecture. We have a good working basis, however, on which to start, but we must hurry up. But I want to catch Halley's concert this afternoon, and we have yet to interview the gallant constable.
I made my report at the office. I've been on duty all night, so if you don't mind, gentlemen...
I'm sure half a sovereign might enable us to hear it all from your own lips.
Oh, well, I shall be most happy to tell you anything I can.
Just let us hear it, all in your own way, as it occurred.
I was taking a look round my beat with PC Harry Murcher at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was raining. Precious dirty and lonely it was. Didn't meet a soul, though a cab or two went past. I was strolling down, thinking between ourselves how uncommon handy a 4 gin hot would be, when suddenly the glint of light caught my eye in the window of that house. I knew it was empty, see. Last tenant who lived there died of typhoid fever. Knocked all in a heap, I was. Reckoned something was wrong, so I got to the door.
You stopped, and then walked back to the garden gate. What did you do that for?
Why, that's true, sir. Though how you come to know it, heaven only knows. You see, when I got up to the door, it was so still and lonesome that I thought I could do with some company. I walked back to find Harry Murcher's lantern, but there wasn't no sign of him, nor of anyone else.
There was no one in the street?
Not a living soul, sir. Nor as much as a dog. Then I pulled myself together and went back and pushed the door open. All was quiet inside, so I went into the room where the light was burning. There was a candle flickering on the mantelpiece. There's a red wax one. And by its light, I saw...
Yes, I know all that you saw. You walked around the room several times, and you knelt by the body, and then you walked through and tried the kitchen door. And then...
Struth! Where was you hid to see all that? Seems to me that you know a great deal more than you should.
Here's my card. Don't start arresting me for the murder. I am one of the hounds and not the wolf. Mr. Gregson or Mr. Lestrade will answer for that. Go on. What did you do next?
Well, I went back to the gate and sounded my whistle, and that brought Murcher and 2 more to the spot.
Was the street empty then?
Well, it was as far as anybody that could be of any good goes.
What do you mean?
Oh, I've seen many a drunk chap in my time, but never anyone so crying drunk as that old soak. He was at the gate when I came out, leaning up against the railings, and singing at the pitch of his lungs about Columbine's newfangled banner or such stuff. He couldn't stand, far less help.
What sort of man was he?
He was an uncommon drunk sort of man. He'd have found himself in the station if we hadn't been so took up.
His face, his dress, didn't you notice them?
I should think I did notice them, seeing that I had to prop him up, me and Murcher between us. He was a long chap with a red face.
Holmes! Quiet. What became of him?
We'd enough to do without looking after him. I'll wager he found his way home all right.
How was he dressed?
Brown overcoat.
Had he a whip in his hand?
A whip? No.
He must have left it behind. You didn't happen to see or hear a cab after that?
No.
There's half a sovereign for you. I'm afraid, Rance, that you will never rise in the force. That head of yours should be for use as well as ornament. You might have gained your sergeant's stripes last night. The man whom you held in your hands is the man who holds the clue of this mystery, and whom we are seeking.
Now look here,
There is no use arguing about it now. I tell you that it is so. Come along, Doctor.
Yes.
The blundering fool. Just to think of his having such an incomparable bit of luck and not taking advantage of it.
I'm rather in the dark still. It is true that the description of this man tallies with your idea of the second party in this mystery. But why should he come back to the house after leaving it? That is not the way of criminals.
The ring, man, the ring. That was what he came back for. If we have no other way of catching him, we can always bait our line with the ring. I shall have him, Doctor. I'll lay you 2 to 1 that I have him. I must thank you for it all. I might not have gone but for you. And I would have missed the finest study I ever came across. A study in Scarlet, eh? Why shouldn't we use a little art jargon? There's the scarlet thread of murder running through the colourless skein of life, and our duty is to unravel it and isolate it and expose every inch of it. And now for lunch, and then a concert by Norman Neruda. Her attack and her phrasing, I think, is splendid in the Beethoven.
So exhausted. Can't sleep. Keep seeing that awful distorted baboon-like face of Mr. Enoch J. Drebber of Cleveland glaring at me. Holmes is back.
It was magnificent. Magnificent. Do you remember what Darwin says about music? He claims that the power of producing and appreciating it existed among the human race long before the power of speech was arrived at. Perhaps that is why we are so subtly influenced by it. There are vague memories in our souls of those misty centuries when the world was in its childhood.
That's rather a broad idea.
One's ideas must be broad as nature if they are to interpret nature. My dear Watson, what's the matter? You're not quite yourself. This Brixton Road affair has upset you?
To tell the truth, it has. I ought to be more care-hardened after my Afghan experiences. I saw my own comrades hacked to pieces at Maiwand without losing my nerve.
I can understand. There is a mystery about this, which stimulates the imagination. Where there is no imagination, there is no horror. Have you seen the evening paper?
No.
It gives a fairly good account of the affair. It does not mention the fact that when the man was raised up, a woman's wedding ring fell upon the floor. It is just as well it does not.
Why?
Look at this advertisement. I had one sent to every paper this morning, immediately after the affair.
Found in Brixton Road this morning a plain gold wedding ring found in the roadway between the White Hart Tavern and Holland Grove. Apply Dr. Watson. 221B Baker Street between 8 and 9 this evening.
Excuse me using your name. If I used my own, some of these dunderheads would recognize it and want to meddle in the affair.
Oh, that's all right. But supposing anyone applies, I have no ring.
Oh, yes, you have. Here. This will do very well. It is almost a facsimile.
And who do you expect will answer this advertisement?
Why, the man in the brown coat. Our florid friend with the square toes. If he does not come himself, he will send an accomplice.
Would he not consider it as too dangerous?
Not at all. If my view of the case is correct, and I have every reason to believe that it is, this man would rather risk anything than lose the ring. I believe he dropped it while stooping over Drebber's body, and did not miss it at the time. After leaving the house, he discovered his loss and hurried back, but found the police already in possession, owing to his own folly in leaving the candle burning. He had to pretend to be a drunk in order to allay the suspicions which might have been aroused by his appearance at the gate. Now, put yourself in his place. On thinking the matter over, it must have occurred to him that it was possible that he had lost the ring in the road after leaving the house. What would he then do? He would eagerly look out for the evening paper in the hope of seeing it among the articles found. His eye, of course, would alight upon this. He would be overjoyed. Why should he fear a trap? There would be no reason in his eyes why the finding of the ring should connect him with the murder. He would come. He will come. You shall see him within an hour.
And then?
Oh, you can leave me to deal with him then. Have you any arms?
I have my old service revolver and a few cartridges.
You better clean it and load it. He will be a desperate man, and though I shall take him unawares, it is as well to be ready for anything.
Edward Petherbridge was Sherlock Holmes, with David Peart as Dr. John H. Watson. The story was adapted for radio by Tim Crook, with violin music performed by Robert Gibbs and Michiku Ueno. I'm Steve Zakar. Support for this program is provided by National Public Radio member stations and the NPR Arts and Performance Fund. This is NPR, National Public Radio.